Welcome to this first part of Digitair's AI Theory to Reality series. I'm your host, Raj, and over the next 45 minutes or so, along with my expert panel, we will be deciphering the promise of generative AI. It's fair to say that there's a lot of excitement at this point of the hype cycle, but we're going to take a look at what's happening around the industry and a peek behind the scenes at organizations as they prepare. In this edition, we will focus on the energy trading sector, and to that end, we are joined by technology leaders Mark Leonard and Kewan Brown. Mark is a director for IT at Drax Group, where he has worked for the past 6 years. In a previous life, he was chairman and CEO at Secure CloudLink, MD at Colt Technology Services, and CIO at Vodafone UK. Kewan, on the other hand, brings to us 25 plus years of technology experience across multiple domains, but with a speciality in energy trading of the last 17. As EVP of Trading IT at Cefe Marketing and Trading, he's accountable for all of the group's trading solutions across gas, power, LNG, and FX. So to start off with then, how far along the hype cycle are we? Mark, maybe you could take this one.
I think that's a great question, Raj. For me, I think we really are at the beginning of the hype curve. It's one of my favorite things that Gartner do, and I think adoption and practical use are a long way off in comparison to what we hear in the media, and with all the billions in marketing that are being poured into generative AI. So I think it's very much something that we have time to think about, time to work through, time to understand and implement properly.
Great. And Kewan.
So, as Mark alluded to, I think if you know the Gartner curve is kind of the peak of expectation, I think we're fundamentally within the hype train for generative AI. It's also worthwhile pointing out that AI as a component and ML, etc., they are way far down that track, and especially within our industry as well. So I think over the course of the next 18-24 months, I think we'll see that kind of being exploited and understood and fleshed out. I think though fundamentally, sitting back and looking at it from a technologist perspective, I do believe that this is a big data, big compute and skills problem. So it's like any other technology problem we face. It's not probably the magic that our C-suite are perceiving it to be.
That's an interesting one about the C-suite as well, because we've got some questions coming through. I can see in the Q&A. So, how much pressure is there to implement from the C-suite in your organizations?
So, Mark, do you want to kick off, and I'll go next?
Sure. I think it's like anything. Hype is hype. Of course, people are very interested in it. And I know we're going to discuss this in a moment, but I think the first thing to do is to really understand what AI is and to have the right policies in place around it. Certainly in the conversations that I've had, we've been very much focusing, when we talk about generative AI, we've been very much focusing on safety, security, data integrity, but we can discuss all of that in more detail as we go. And I think, as Kewan said, for many organizations, including both Cefe and Drax, AI and ML is a technology we're very familiar with, and where we've created multiple digital twins. So all the hype is not around the technology that we know and love so well, but it is around the generative capability.
Yeah. Any build on that, Kewan?
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think fundamentally, though, with regards to the pressure, and obviously the pressure will come from front office, it'll come from the C-suite, or come from other functions within the organization. But in reality, very few of those groups have identified very clear use cases regarding generative AI. And I think this is one of the big questions you have to answer before you start down that track because there is significant investment from a people perspective, a technology perspective, and certainly from a compute perspective that people don't appreciate. So, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
And earlier you mentioned policy. So I'm curious now and what your organizational policies are and how you're preparing.
So I'll take
You
that
go
one
to,
first, if
yeah.
that's okay. So I think there's a couple of things regarding policy. I think, if you cast your mind back to the original AI machine learnings that we've used in the past, we're talking about the Google TensorFlows and PyTorch and a few other products that have been around. I think those entered into our environments very quickly. It wasn't seen as a massive risk, and that's largely because it was all on premise. I think the complexity comes now with Gen AI is that most of these models tend to be off-premise, SaaS-based services, which means that you're moving your data sets out. So as Mark's already alluded to, you now need to start worrying about data privacy, data governance, and security, which I don't think a lot of some of our commercial teams worry about. That's something that tends to be something that's more an IT focus. And we've obviously already started to see some of the horror stories coming out of data being lost or leaked outside of those models running. I think the other thing you need to focus on is the transparency and auditability of these tools, because once you do move into Gen AI and a decision is made that it has a financial consequence, the regulator, the auditors are going to come knocking and ask you what started that decision, how was it made, how have we got there? And I think one of the big problems are a lot of these big models, these generative AIs are largely SaaS-based, black boxes, so there's not a lot of that. Obviously, you have your regulatory compliance. I think another area of concern is accountability, who owns it, because it will sit between IT, the front office, back office. And then there's another element around ethical/environmental usage, which I think it will be front and center shortly. I mean, as a good example, and if it doesn't take a lot of reading to find that something like GPT-3, I think, emitted almost 500 tons of CO2 in the training of it, which is the equivalent of driving a car 700,000 kilometers. So initially, from a policy perspective, I think the initial policies, which we'll probably have to develop over time, will focus on data, transparency, and compliance. But I expect it to follow significantly more elements as it kind of goes through its life cycle. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely with Kieran. We are very much looking at this holistically. So I think from an AI perspective, you have to think about not just the technology, but I think you need to think about its impact on the workforce, the impact on people, and making sure that that's done in a really beneficial way for everyone. So the policy that we're in the process of building really looks at that much wider context. I think what's interesting is, and we already have a number of big companies who've come out and said that they're blocking generative AI, and I think that's pretty quickly going to become the norm. And the reason is it's obviously you can data can leak into into the wild, so to speak. Once it's in the model, it's in the model, right? It's in the LLM for forever. But also, I think there are some really other interesting aspects. So sentiment, a company's sentiment could very quickly become observable in the large language model. Depending on what people are, the questions that they're asking, it's possible to infer lots of things, sentiment, culture, etc. let alone, hard facts or customer data, which of course steps over the boundaries of regulation. So some of the aspects that we're looking at will be, how you train people as well. And I don't mean, the data scientists, I mean, all the normal staff members in a company who might possibly be allowed an exception to be able to use something like ChatGPT. So it's quite wide ranging, and I think Kieran's absolutely right. It takes in every aspect of the business. It just using Gen AI, for example, to send a chasing email to maybe someone that is in debt, could have enormous implications if the wrong data is presented. So I think we're going to see, as this matures, much more of a move to hold things securely and maybe bring the LLMs on-prem.
Oh, that raised quite a few themes there, didn't it, in terms of green computing, talent, security, privacy. I'd like to dig into that a little bit later. But the energy trading sector has historically been rife with trader-based screens, not particularly real-time, it's quite batch system heavy, not particularly event-driven. So you now got this disruptive technology. So how do you get your house in order first to take advantage of it?
Mark, you want to go first?
Nicely done.
Yeah.
Again, I think the difference here is, obviously working within the regulations. I think that's absolutely key. But it's really the digital models that you build, or the digital twins. So, we all know that the energy market deals with a lot of forecasting and hedging. And, we've had algorithms in that space industry-wide for a very, very long time. I'm trying to think through how you would use something like generative AI to enhance that. And maybe there's something around sentiment there, but I do think a lot of the models that we have already take into account the typical thing, when are the Six Nations on, and when is everyone going to run and make a cup of tea? I know that's a huge simplification, but I think we already have many, many models that we're constantly refining. And I think this is where we have to be very careful about the split between AI, ML, and generative AI. Kieran, that's enough time for you to...
No, that's okay. So out of all the questions, I think this is one of the hardest ones, because fundamentally it's going to be aligned to your use case. And I think there still needs to be the same level of rigor that you would put into any other IT program or project. You still need a business case, you need a use case, you need to understand your cost model and what the benefits are. You need to put in place a governance structure to support that, and then also manage your data sets. Now, across all of that, I think you're also going to need to have when you say what do you need to have your house in order, a lot of this is going to be data driven. And I think it's fair to say in the energy space and the commodity space, data is a problem for us. It's always been a problem. Data attribution, consistency of data sets, where it's stored, how it's accessed, etc. And I know pretty much all of our competitors and peers are all going through the same program where they're kind of rebaselining all their data sets and all their systems and solutions. You need to make sure it's prepared for the utilization and usage by Gen AI to ensure that it can actually work, because, while some models are very good at taking poor data sets, the majority are going to need some very well-trained data sets to be able to be even effective. That being said, I think you still need to make sure that you have the right people. I think, I'll mention it later. I think we are on the cusp of a resource war like we've never seen before. Technologists we've always fought over technologists, but now it's definitely a space that will cover kind of commercial / data scientists / technology people, and the intersection of those, of which is very few. I think we're going to struggle with that as well. So there's all of, making sure you've got the education, making sure you're upskilling your staff, making sure you're giving them time to perform explorative activities so that they can come up to speed and have the base skill sets that you can develop it out. And I think the other thing that the C-suite need to understand is this is a technology, unlike, if you look at the internet, took 30 years to become kind of standard. Smartphones were kind of 10 to 15 years. Generative AI has taken 18 months. So this is an industry that's going to move very quickly. And as a result, there's going to be a lot of options for failure. And I think that needs to be probably front and center with the C-suite and the investors, that we are going to try some things and it's not going to work, or it's not going to be beneficial on occasion.
And I'm glad you brought up data, because it seems like a fundamental part of getting that correct. So data management, data quality. So how do you protect your data, right? And how do you ensure quality?
So quality is I think a separate problem, because we have that problem now, and it's irrelevant to Gen AI or even AI. It's just a problem that we have in the industry. So I think the protection element is the one that is going to have a lot of focus initially. And as Mark's alluded to, there's data leakage, the fact that people can understand the behaviors of an organization by the types of prompts and queries that they're running. And that's a problem for all of us. And I think this is largely driven by the fact that in the past, a lot of our AI ML was on-prem. We built it locally. with our own tools, our own people, and we've developed that pretty successfully over the last few years. But because of the acceleration in skills, technology, and just subject matter expertise, a lot of these things, and the compute cost, a lot of these things are now based in the cloud or SaaS-based products, which means you now have to think about how would you get data in and out. And the types of things that people are doing is obviously the standard things that you do. You encrypt in flight, you encrypt at rest. You also look at data obfuscation as well. You also start putting in place tighter access controls on how those data sets come in and come out, and then who has access to them. Obviously, you can also start performing activities where you start pulling sensitive data out of the data sets if it's not required for model training, and then kind of reconstituting or rehydrating on the way back. And I think there's two other things that you need to consider, which a lot of people don't talk about, but there is going to be a situation at some stage where you have data leakage or you have information that's flowing out. You need an exit strategy. You need a way to stop that, the big red button that you hit on your desktop to say, stop that, shut it down right now, because sometimes that's a little bit harder than you would expect. And then the other thing to do is make sure that once this data is moving in and out, you have regular audits from a monitoring and operational perspective, because someone in the front office sending stuff into a model doesn't really care about the sensitivity. Data protection officer, security team, etc., they are going to be pretty worried about it. So you need regular updates, because over time the model will accept different tokens, different parameters, etc., and you need to keep on validating to make sure that that's still consistent with your security posture. Mark?
I mean, I think that was, very, very well put, Kieran. I think the only thing that I would add to that is making sure that you take the time to design everything with the principle, that we call secure by design. And I think the challenge with that your business stakeholders who want functionality and want functionality quickly, but having the right design principles at the outset means that you can build all of that security into the solution, because it's fundamental, as Kieran said. We have to keep this data safe 100%. That's probably in today's world the most important thing that we can do in technology as we provide solutions and services. We only have to look at recent news, and it popped out yesterday or the day before about Southern Water, right? And not just the business problem that they have as a result of it, but the impact on potentially thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who've had their details compromised. So I think that secure by design is really important, and managing your stakeholders so that they understand why you're actually building the solutions in that way is probably one of the things that technologists tend to overlook. There is a reason for doing the design properly up front, and it's a bit like we always use the metaphor of building a house. If you don't build a house with secure foundations, we all know what's going to happen, right? And if you build all the security in at the start, it's going to cost you a lot less than trying to add it after the fact.
So it looks like we're leveraging all the lessons learned from building software over the last 20, 25 years, right? So secure by design, zero trust, the big red button if the worst case happens, and a lot of the lessons we've learned from algorithmic trading, for example, runaway algos and interfering with the market and the impact that might cause. We've got lots of questions coming through thick and fast right now, so I'm going to try and amalgamate those into themes. One of the ones is really about specific challenges that you can see AI addressing, and any use cases the commercial teams are actively working on.
I'll jump in first. Mark gave a nice long pause there. So I think, let's just sit, how are we using AI, as an organization? Obviously, you can't give away too much, but I like to separate it into kind of three distinct areas. The first area is the kind of more the productivity tools. So I would suspect that pretty much everyone on this call has probably played with or rolled out or in the process of rolling out something like Copilot for GitHub for the developers, Copilot for the office, maybe some enterprise version of ChatGPT for specific users, maybe supporting procurement team or the legal team to analyze documents. And I think that is a low risk, easy way to get into generative AI, low cost relatively, and obviously from a data perspective also secured by default, because obviously a lot of the SaaS providers understand that. The second kind of area or use cases for AI is the stuff that we've already spoken about, is the stuff that's baked into what we're already doing. So this is kind of your enterprise AI tools, ML, where we've built grid optimization, asset optimization, kind of forecasting models, data analytics models, maybe in the front office, and then maybe in the back office, kind of credit management, KYC, risk management tools, etc. Those are kind of the standard use cases that we've all dealt with, and currently certainly the enterprise AI elements are discrete problems. There's technologies to solve it. We've been working on it for the last couple of years. The last area is kind of more this area that's probably aligned to probably more your your kind of cognitive generative AI type solutions, which may or may not impact large elements of your maybe your deal life cycle, your optimization. And obviously there's quite a few areas in this space. So for instance, there's probably a lot of demand for it to be looking at algo trading. There's probably a lot of demand to perform activity around optimizing grid and trading. I think personally, I think the opportunity to use generative AI to help with the kind of the transition to net zero, there's lots of opportunities in that space. However, these elements are the ones that I think people are starting to battle with, because it's what is the use case? How do we use it? How do we get the skills? And then also, once we've got the skills and we understand the models, is how do we manage the costs associated with it? To give people a sense, something like ChatGPT, the training of that model costs about $4 million just train that model. I think the Meta Llama was about $2.5 million. So this is not a trivial undertaking, and the amount of compute power and the data requirements and the skill sets are almost a barrier to entry until some of those elements become almost commercialized as tools that we can use. And I think the challenge that we have in the energy market is a lot of these things tend to be generalistic as opposed to domain specific. And as you all know, everyone on the call that's probably dialed in, if you're working in the energy sector, you know how complex our environment is. And I think that's where the challenge is really.
So, I mean, thank you, Kieran. Lots to build on there. I mean, Drax has several different businesses. We have two supply businesses, B2B, and obviously in a supply business, the initial conversations are going to be all around how do you make customer relationships more effective. So where can you use generative AI to do that securely and safely? I think in terms of the traditional AI, ML, what we like to call digital twins, again, we're a generator, and we're also a pellet manufacturer of biomass. We have long supply chains, and very complicated models in terms of how even a turbine spins, right? So I think we're well acquainted with that. We invested quite heavily in what we call data science, over the past 4 years to really make sure that we've got an adequate capability to keep the, to drive those efficiencies for the company. I guess the interesting thing is, as always, I think the best way is to try and drink your own champagne. So from an innovation perspective, if you look at the classic problem that you have in any kind of IT or technology organization, you have many different artifacts in many different formats. And so we are running what we call an innovation pilot, where we are looking at the problem of knowledge management, but that's by bringing a smaller LLM on-prem. So I think we will understand, pretty quickly the opportunities and the benefits for the wider organization, and what the possibilities are right now. Because even with things like Copilot, where they say you're safe, your data is still out there. They take it out and then they delete the cache. Now, I'm guessing that all happens very, very quickly in real time. but theoretically, there's still an opportunity. That's something that we want to get into much more deeply with Microsoft to understand, the security boundaries.
It sounds like you're really learning from experimentation there, Mark. And
Yeah.
I think one of the things you just said about having your own LLM, we've got an attendee asking, companies seem to be creating their own internal chat GPTs. Is that something that's going to become the norm across the industry, do you think?
Well, I think it certainly will at the moment, because it's pretty clear that if you use ChatGPT or Bard or whatever else, that it's part of that common large public large language model. So yes, I can't really see much of an alternative now. I think there is obviously a consumer market, as always, which is, pretty big in and of itself. And then there's an enterprise technology market. I think once, the big tech companies understand that people are nervous, then, I think we'll get to much more of a multi-tenanted approach. If I can draw a very simple parallel with what happened around cloud computing initially, perhaps that's the way it will develop if the really big players do want us to use their technology.
Any more to add on that, Kieran? Or
So I agree with what Mark's saying. I mean, if you follow some of the kind of blogs, etc., Databricks have released their own LLM called Dolly, and I think it costs them $30 to train it. And it has, from a kind of a chat GPT ripoff, it has a lot of the same capabilities, but you can bring it on house and train it to maybe be more domain specific. So I think the development of those types of Gen AI components over time will accelerate quickly when people realize that certainly you need domain specific elements for it to be successful within an area, etc. And then I think the other push will either be, if it's not multi-tenant, and it's going to be largely how can I take this in-house, how can I run it in-house, etc., so I can manage it all myself. Because I think the security concerns are, and I think we haven't even touched on it, and I know we'll get there, is the regulatory elements, because fundamentally I don't think the regulators are set up for this, and the byproducts or unintended consequences that come about from Gen AI are going to cause responses from the regulators. And I think this is where it's going to get very, very interesting very quickly.
well, let's go there now then, Kieran. So what are the regulatory challenges and compliance risks you think or we may
So, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to call it as I said. I don't think the regulators, be it governments, be it our own regulators within the energy markets, within the kind of physical markets in the UK, Europe, are set up for this. I don't think they realize what's coming. I don't think they understand the impacts. I think what will happen is that these models and tools will start exploiting elements of the market, the exchanges, the TSOs that we've never seen before, and it's going to either cause issues, being a kind of maybe a pessimist in my views, or it's going to change so dramatically it will put a lot of pressure on those grids and those exchanges. As a result, I suspect that you will end up with a situation where the first mover in these spaces will probably end up driving the reaction from the regulator, and it's probably going to be initially a knee-jerk reaction. So there is probably a call, and I saw one of the questions, is there an element for distributed AI? Is there, I think there's probably a call to arms for the industry to start talking about self-regulation, because the reality is if a government board takes 18, 24 months to come up with some regulations, some of our teams are turning around things in 2, 3, 4 weeks. they're just not going to be fast enough. So I think that's one of the big problems. And to prevent the kind of the first mover who might be unscrupulous and might just be about profits, etc., could be damaging for the rest of the industry because of the response from the regulators. I think the other challenge we're going to face is that as we operate in a disparate world across UK, Europe, and the rest of the globe, each marketplace is going to have different regulations, which is going to make it very difficult to have these holistic models that can support optimization across the grid, which will be to the detriment, I think, of how these models work and the benefits that they can probably bring to the transition to net zero, etc. So I think those are some of the big issues that we'll face. I think you will see that there will be things that will be put in place pretty shortly. I know some of the regulators are really starting to talk about it because they're worried about the impacts on algo trading. I think the other problem that we'll have is due to misunderstood activity, so by our own teams, because fundamentally they may not fully understand the transparency and the auditability of those models, how they work and the resulting activities, which may then inadvertently put our own teams and our own staff in hot water because we breach compliance rules. And I think that's another risk that we face. So, there's a lot to unpack there, and maybe I'm a foreteller of doom, but I think that this is going to be probably one of the biggest issues we have in wholesale adoption of Gen AI is kind of how the regulators respond, how compliance responds. And obviously we all know, based on recent energy prices, there will be a lot of political pressure for them to respond quickly.
Wow. And Mark, anything more on the optimistic side of that, or, or do you want to carry on with that theme?
I think I agree completely with Kieran. I think data integrity, data lineage, and auditability are going to be key. And if we go back to a comment you made before, Raj, which is learning from 25 years or more of software development, we have these cycles, right? We went from mainframe to client server. We went from client server to the web. We went from that to microservices, etc., etc. And every time the cry is always agility, agility, agility. We can be more productive. We can be more agile. And of course, that's true. And they've been totally transformational. But, the people who are wise learn from what happened in the past, and they make sure that they build the capabilities that you needed in terms of operability and auditability and security and all of those good things. You need to build that in now. You need to be thinking about that now, because I think that that will very, very quickly become a big problem.
It's quite foundational, isn't it? So let's go through rapid style on the last few questions, because I realize our time is coming to an end. And let's focus on talent. So how are you investing in your talent to take on generative AI initiatives?
I think, we have a pretty big focus on development and training. And I think there's always a wonderful balance, isn't there, between what the company needs to do and what the individual should be accountable for as well. We are absolutely committed to making sure that we grow our people, and are engaged in doing that very proactively. I think probably the more interesting piece, as Kieran mentioned before, is skills shortages, and we always go through this push-pull piece, don't we? When any new technology emerges in IT, suddenly, really good people are scarce. They get paid a lot of money, and then everyone goes, wow, they're earning a lot of money. Why don't I train and learn to do that so I can earn a lot of money too? And then the supply meets demand, and we get back to something like a normal world. I think we just need to be thinking ahead. We need more foresight. We need to plan more effectively, because I think when this capability becomes, a truly commercial reality and differentiator, you need to be upskilled and ready at that point in time, right? You can't wait, because otherwise, you'll be being asked to deliver a lot, and you won't have the people to be able to do it.
Thank you. And the talent question for you and Seth.
Massive problem. I think you need, as Mark said, you need clear education streams. You need to take the people that are and evolve the people that are already your ML AI type teams, your technologists, maybe some of your front office teams. You need to bring them together in a center of excellence so they can pool their knowledge, because realistically, not one person is going to be able to do everything. I think you also need to seed your teams with external suppliers and SMEs to support the growth of your individuals. And then I think the most importantly, which, whenever we try to do this in the past, unless you can kind of backfill your teams or give them some time to actually develop this as part of their day job. And I appreciate there's a balance between them playing with tech versus actually delivering value. You also need to be able to give them the time, maybe bringing in additional resources to help them kind of do their day jobs. I think, that's in a nutshell what we're probably having to look to focus on. But it's, the short summary is it's a massive problem.
Okay. And hopefully Kieran's still with us. So we're oh,
back, sorry.
No worries.
Camera went off. Yeah.
No worries at all. And so for the last few minutes then, any final thoughts around what the future holds, and how you stay informed with all the trends around AI and in the sector as well?
I mean, I think there was a very interesting question about, do you have a central team? Do you allow the business to, build their own capability? And I think again, lessons learned from the past tells you that, what people like to call citizen IT, very quickly becomes problem IT. I think it is about, coming back to something Kieran said right at the beginning about having business cases, really solid business cases. We all need to learn, we all need to experiment, we need to innovate, that's fine. But I think, what are the real business cases here, and, and hard benefits to the company. So I think that's always an interesting tension between people that can truly create true digital models and people who are maybe creating sophisticated reports. I think so. That's a key one for me in terms of keeping a watch on the market. I mean, I think that's fundamentally part of the the day job, right? I think we really need to all IT leaders and technologists, we need to be watching the market very, very carefully.
On that, watching the market, Kieran, any further build?
So I've managed to list out some of my podcasts, etc. I'm happy to share after this. some of them are fascinating. Some people won't be that interested in it. But I agree with Mark. It's part of your day job as a technologist leader, is just being on top of trends and understanding these things. Just in closing thoughts or ideas and what the future holds, I think fundamentally, you are going to need, as Mark alluded to, you're going to need business cases. This is going to cost money, but unlike other business cases in the past where you probably had quite a high confidence level that it will be successful, I think we need to acknowledge that because the technology is moving so quickly, that you need to give the teams the opportunity to be explorative in how they develop that technology, and you're going to have a higher level of failures within the technology streams than what you probably used to. I think that is going to be the one that will challenge most C-suites. I think you'll see OPEX numbers going up, and people are going to ask what value I get out of that. And that's, obviously you can take a wait and see approach, or you can jump in head first and be on the cutting edge. That's obviously up for the stance of each organization based on their risk profile. But I'll go back to it. Fundamentally for me, this is still a big it is a technology problem. Big data, big compute, resourcing. And I think for me, we can probably solve the first two because those are commoditized skill sets. The resourcing area is the area that I think fundamentally will be the most difficult element to deal with, because this is not just around I'm learning a technology. You're actually becoming a domain expert in neural nets and a whole host of other things. And those types of people are very rare on the ground.
And I think that brings us to the end. Very much learning from history, understanding what the talent problem is, and keeping ourselves abreast of all the challenges as technology leaders. I think it's a good place to end. It's been a great conversation. Thank you very much to our panelists, Mark and Kieran, and to you, dear listener, for joining us. Join us next time as we go behind the scenes at transformation in the financial services sector. And feel free to connect on LinkedIn or on our website to continue the conversation. See you soon.
Thank you.